Welcome, advocates, to another episode of the Leading Equity Podcast, a podcast that focuses on supporting educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Today's special guest is a repeat guest. This brother's been on my show before, and I had such a great conversation. So when he reached out and said, "Look, I got a book coming out, Sheldon. Can we jump back on the mic?" I said, absolutely. So without further ado, Dr. Shamari Reid is here. Thank you so much, Shamari, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for replying with so much enthusiasm and joy when I was like, I got to talk to Sheldon. If there's anybody I want to talk to about where I am now and thinking about equity, it had to be you, man. And so I just appreciate you for just opening up your space once again to host me. I'm really excited about the conversation with you, the dreaming with you, the building with you.
Let's do it. Yeah. It's a pleasure, always mine. As I told you before we hit record, like I use a lot of the content from our first episode, and I'll leave the link in the show notes, folks, so if you want to hear our first conversation. But I utilize that content now, and it's still relevant. Mm-hmm. And I think we linked up about 3 years ago. I want to say
that was a while ago.
You weren't even a doctor yet.
I was struggling, trying to make it through.
So let's do it. All right. So. I know who you are, but I'd love for you to share with our audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Sure. So my name is Dr. Shamari Reid, and I feel like the first thing I should say because of the book is I'm a human, right? I feel like that is how I want to introduce myself. I'm a human, but by day, I work as an assistant professor of teaching and learning at New York University, focusing on curriculum, equity, race, gender, sexuality, and love. And I would say, by night, a community member. It's really important for me to think about how I'm supporting different communities around New York City who don't have access to the things they need, but they do have the wisdom. And so I'm always thinking about how to siphon, right? How to siphon resources that I can access as a professor and put them into the community so people can use them in ways that make sense to them. They can take care of themselves. I think that's what I'm thinking about a lot now is how to show up for people who want me there and assist them in taking better care of themselves as opposed to waiting for something to drop out of the sky to make it all make sense.
All right. Well, you're a human first, and I'm glad you brought that up because, we're going to be talking about that. So you are the author of Humans Who Teach, a guide for centering love, justice, and liberation in schools. And I want to start there. I mean, what does that mean to you, humans that teach?
Yeah. I think about it in three ways, but I'll start here. It's a political statement, man. It's a political statement because I feel like as a teacher myself, I began my career as a high school teacher, did middle school, then kindergarten, which we could talk about, and then back up to middle school again, and then adults. But I feel like as I was coming up through the field, people talked to me and about teachers like we were these robots, right? It was just like, oh, you can do that. You're a teacher. Oh, you could change your lesson at the drop of a dime. You're a teacher. COVID comes. Oh, you can move your entire curricula online by Tuesday. You're a teacher. And a lot of that just felt like it disregarded the complexity of being a human. It's like, hey, I'm in the same pandemic you're in. Yeah. I suffer and experience the same kind of loss you do. It's hard work that we do. It's not just you click a button and the lesson plan appears. Somebody has to sit down and think about the objectives and the standards and the students in the classroom and leadership and limitations and create that. And so it's a political statement to say, just a reminder, the people who do this work that is so important are humans and deserve so much more respect, so much more compassion, so much more money. And so that is what it means to me. I think I see you.
It's so much money. I'm gonna let you finish. Go ahead.
So much more money. It's a political statement. It's to say to teachers, you are human, and to those who don't teach, we are human. Regard us as such. Treat us as such. When you're engaging with us, remember that we are humans and we have the same complexities and complications and limitations you do. And the beautiful thing is, as humans, we also can tap into the same loving place. Because we are not robots, we are afforded all kinds of powerful things that other humans have, like our emotions and like our love and all of that. So the book is an exploration of that. I would say 3 parts, if you will. First part is just like, hey, you're not a superhero. I know people told you that you were. I heard a lot as a Black man in education that I was supposed to like fix all these problems. And I was excited about it. They were like, you Black man, we got you. You got your degree. You're going to go teach in the schools you grew up in these inner cities, neighborhoods, and you're going to fix it. And I believed it, Sheldon. I was just like, yeah, I'm going to do all of that. I'm going to free everybody. And then I get into school and realize, wow, I don't have the time I need. I don't have the money. I don't have the resources.
Yeah.
And I was going above and beyond, and I wasn't able to make these huge shifts. And I began like beating myself up because I was told I was a superhero, and I had to realize, oh, I'm a human with a lot of passion, with a calling, but I have limitations. I actually can't work 70 hours a week. I actually do have to take a break. I have to set boundaries. Unfortunately, I can't rap, with parents until midnight till 1 a.m. It's unhealthy. I need a social life, etc. So the book starts there, and then it moves into what does it mean to take care of ourselves as humans? Like, what do we need physically? And the book talks a lot about physical well-being. Then it gets into the emotional stuff. Teaching, how do you know this? The stuff we hear and the amount of things we carry that is put on us, it's a lot, man. And if we don't have a space to process and navigate, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not the only one. After the school day, I used to sit in my classroom and just be heavy because I'm like, wow, this person told me that. This person told me this. I'm trying to fix everybody's problems. Meanwhile, my life is going up in flames. I'm not paying attention to myself. And so that's part 2. And then part 3 is love. Part 3 is like, all right, you done introduced us to some complexities. You told us it could be pretty difficult and challenging. Well, what's the way forward? It's as humans, you have this thing called love, this force that can drive us to make sacrifices, to show up for people, to show up for kids, show up for ourselves. And so, yeah, that's the book in about 5 minutes.
There you go. There you go. Obviously, folks, you got to get your hands on the book. At the time of this recording, it's not out yet. It's going to be out later on this month in March. So, but we'll leave the links for the pre-orders, folks, so you can go ahead and grab your copy or at least have it ready to go as soon as it gets shipped out. But, there's some things that you said, Shamari, that really stuck out to me because as a person that was in the classroom for several years as well, and even as a school principal, and special ed, it's as you got me reflecting now. It's one of the things that stood out with what you said was the overarching theme of empathy.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, like, because everything you just said, we're not superheroes, and your own experience, but then we start to feel bad.
That's right.
Because we couldn't stay out later, or we couldn't take that phone call. We needed to get home to our children. We needed this, or we needed to deal with. And so we start to feel bad. And I think sometimes I agree from the political side of things, there is that expectation that we're supposed to be all of these things. And they forget that we're not. Yeah, all the time. I used to joke around because like, I remember I would go to the grocery store and see a student.
Mm-hmm.
And think in my head, oh, you better not buy that bottle of wine.
That's right.
That's right. Because there goes your little second grader kid.
And you're on stage, right?
You're always on. You're always on. You go to the festival, you go to a carnival, you see children, you see your kids, and you're always on. I don't know, what kind of advice maybe can you give when it comes to the empathetic side of things? Because sometimes we feel bad that we cannot meet all of these expectations.
Sure. So I talk about a really heavy story in the book. I'll abbreviate it here, but it's really heavy. And it was when I reflected and I realized how out of balance I was. So my second year teaching, my younger sister, we're 5 years apart, my best friend, like this is someone, growing up, she saw me, I saw her, but second year teaching, my sister was killed. And I didn't know how to hold space for myself. And I didn't know how to have empathy for myself. And so I took one day off work. I remember I found out the news about her murder at like 2 a.m. And my instinct was to go to the school and work. It wasn't to heal. It wasn't to go be with family, to be with my mother. All I knew how to do was work, Sheldon. And so I went to the school about 3 a.m. and I redid my lesson plan. And I, wrote the sub plans on there. And I told myself, I will give myself 24 hours to grieve the loss of my best friend, to deal with the tragedy, the violent way that, her life was taken. And I went back to work one day later. And I was teaching language at that time, man. And I was teaching Spanish. And ironically enough, the lesson was about family. So here I am trying to teach about language of family and use the word sister. Meanwhile, 24 hours ago, mine was taken. And no one encouraged me to have empathy for myself. Nobody said, slow down. They all said, wow, what a great teacher you are. And then I can look back on my life, 10 years later and say, I wasn't good to myself. There was no self-empathy. I didn't know how to stop and ask. And so to the advice I would give to folks, other teachers who may be navigating those situations in which you feel like to be a good teacher is to always be on, I'll say, you can only be and love as deeply, one, as you love yourself. You only can give what you have. That day that I taught that lesson on family wasn't my best. The enthusiasm that I like to bring, the joy that I like to bring, it wasn't there. The lesson was drab. I mean, I was crying. I would turn around to write on the board to mask tears because I didn't want to cry in front of students. And so every 25 seconds, because I'm being triggered, because they're asking me, family, 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 I'm turning around, crying for 5 seconds, turning back around and continuing the lesson. And it didn't work. It wasn't great teaching. I wasn't able to show up. And so what I do now, what I talk about in the book a lot, is about introspection. And I know you've had someone on the show called Yolanda Sealy Ruiz, who is like just a giant for us, right? And just so incredible. But she talks about the archaeology of the self. And so I'm talking about something very similar where I'm saying you reflect on your own humanity, reflect on your own needs, your physical needs, your emotional needs, spiritual needs, and you get well. You got to be well. Because once we're well, we teach from that place. I was teaching from a place of grief, and I've taught before from frustration. I mean, you and I talked a little bit about this, but teachers have long days sometimes. I know that, and we can get frustrated. And imagine a student asks a question or needs some help and we snap. Not because we're mean or malicious or we don't care about them. It's just too much. And we teach and engage from that place. And so we've got to be well if, in fact, we want to be good, and loving and caring. And I know you talk a lot about equity. And so equity, when I think about equity, I think about justice, liberation. That requires love, care, and joy and wellness. We can't do that from a place of anger, frustration, et cetera. And so it's just an imperative for me. And I'm saying to all humans who teach, we've got to make sure we are okay. We've got to model that wellness for students as well. My students learned a very, I think, dangerous lesson. One is that work is the more important thing and don't handle grief, don't handle emotions. And yet I'm talking to them about social emotional learning. And it's like, yo, you're not modeling it. You're telling us to check in with ourselves. Teachers talk about social emotional learning, but we just stuff our feelings down. We mask ours because people call that good teaching. I'm saying that's not good teaching. It's not good practice. It's not kind. It's not empathetic. It's not compassionate to yourself or anybody else because you allow yourself to live on this edge where you can snap on people who don't deserve it, especially young people.
Man, listen, that was heavy. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, just rehashing those memories, I know is a lot for you to deal with right now. So I appreciate you. It made me think of that phrase, how can you fill?
That's
How
right.
can you pour? How can you pour from an empty cup? That really hits home. And I know a lot of teachers will say, or even, let's just call it educators, because even school principals, administrators, even at that level, again, we all are human and we deal with whatever we're dealing with.
Right.
And folks will say, oh, well, I knew that, there's a lot of teachers have been calling out this week. We're already at a teacher shortage, or, it's a pain to put together lesson plans for a sub to come in, or I feel like I'm letting the team down if I'm not taking care of myself because of what happens when I come back the next day. Someone's going to make me feel bad. Oh, you weren't here. And so these things are in our minds when it comes to, like you said, that mental health. How do we get past that? So that because at the end of the day, you're right. It's not going to be a good lesson.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. How do we get beyond it? In the book, I talk a lot about my hero, Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
And I use a lot of Tony's work to talk about self-regard.
Mhm.
There's a whole chapter in the book that talks about what it looks like to disconnect your self-worth and your value from a capitalist system that tells you you're only as valuable as you are at work and as productive as you can be. And I had to decouple that with I am valuable even when I cannot go to work.
Mm.
I am valuable when I have to call in. I am valuable and my life is worthy and I matter and I'm human even when I cannot show up and do this thing. That's really hard because in the social services, like education and other professions, we are told that our value is intrinsically tied to how often, how frequently, and how much we show up at work. It's just a thing, and it's very, very unhealthy. And we hear these voices that make us feel bad to the point you mentioned around, oh, but if you don't show up, someone else has to do more work. But if we have a community where we are honoring our humanity, we'll understand that, no, you can't just pass that work on to someone else. Some things don't get done. They just don't. And it's okay because that is just how it goes. I think we sometimes kill ourselves, and I do mean so literally. I think about how many people we look up to that we've lost. I think about like Audre Lorde, for example, and Bell Hooks and other people who died relatively young. And Audre Lorde talked about how she but how the university killed her because it took too much. It wanted too much. And there was no time to stop and breathe and say, well, wait a minute, what do I need? I want to make sure that I'm here for a long time so that I can give for a long time. And I don't know if we have the kind of system right now that honors that. It's kind of like give 80 hours a week. Yeah, but 40 of those 80 hours are not good, by the way, if I'm being very clear. I'm having to redo stuff. I'm tired doing the work. I'm making mistakes, etc. And so what I offer to some people, it'll hit for some and not for everybody, is self-regard. Being able to understand that the way you see yourself has to come from internal. If you build that up and you have enough fortitude in your self-regard, it doesn't matter what people say about me at my job. It doesn't matter because I know who I am and that I have worth. Oh, Shamari didn't come to work today because he has COVID or he's sick. Sure, that's the truth. I'm at home resting. I'm taking care of my body because I matter. It's also really important for me as a Black person to do that because I often talk about Black Lives Mattering. I cannot say Black Lives Matter and then the very next day dishonor my own Black life. It is a contradiction. And so I will take care of myself because I believe and love us and in my people. And I have to model that for us. I want us to be well. We deserve that. We are not here to work. We're not doing that anymore. And so Toni Morrison helped me unlearn it. And she wrote a lot about self-regard. And I'm just so grateful to her and her words. And so in the book, I draw on her a lot to share with other educators in the hopes that it brings us all closer to our humanity and away from thinking of ourselves as robots in a capitalist system.
So I wanna unpack self-regard a little bit more because I know sometimes we wait till it's too late. It's kind of like what you said, as far as we've lost some folks early on, at early ages, and sometimes we wait till the last second. Well,
Sure.
now we want the mental health, and we want to
Right.
go get support. And not too long ago, I learned about the importance of having a self-care plan.
Mhm.
Just maintenance. You shouldn't have to. What is it? Being more proactive than reactionary,
That's
right?
right.
And so some, of course, tragedy. There's things that we can't
Sure.
really prepare for those kind of things. But overall, if we're in a good mood, if we're have that self regard where we're like, I almost cussed. I got to be careful. I don't care. I was going to say something else. I don't care. I don't care what other people say or think or their opinions about me. I am who I am and I matter. What kind of tips do you give for those individuals? Or maybe let me ask you, what do you do
Yeah.
when it comes to that self-regard and maintenance?
I love that you talked about a self-care plan. I
Mhm.
love that I love that we're talking about this in education. That it's incredibly healthy. And to jump forward, then back a little bit to your question,
Yeah.
because I talk about love a lot in the book. But the way I understand love is a way that was very much influenced by lots of Black scholars and Black writers, but specifically Bell Hooks. And people quote her a lot, right? I mean, Bell Hooks is like, wow, one of the goats, right? Bell
Yeah.
Hooks, love. But what she said in the beginning of her definition of love is regard and love for oneself. And I think we often think of that as something that has to come from us to someone else. But what does it mean to love the self? And so the way I think about loving the self is that means you take care of the thing you love. You take care of the self, which means you have to have a self-care plan. And so I love that you talked about it, because in the book, I talk about a self-care plan that's not just physical self-care, which is the sleep and the exercise and the fruits and the veggies, but it's the emotional self-care, which is the breathing, it's the therapy, it's the meditation, it's the taking breaks, it's taking walks. And I talk about spiritual self-care, which is not about religion at all. Spirit for me, spirituality for me is about the place of your joy. It is about making sure you're full of joy, listening to music, hanging out with your friends, playing video games. It's keeping the joy meter full. And so that's the advice I would give anyone, is to check in with yourself and ask yourself, okay, if the goal for me is to make sure that I'm leading a peaceful life, a loving life, a joyful life, what do I need to be well? So I journaled about it. That's how I figured out what my self-care plan was, is I wrote in my journal across a few days, what does Shamari's body need physically to be well? And I thought about it. I don't sleep enough. I don't get enough fruits and veggies. I don't, rest enough. I don't exercise enough. I'll be honest, I didn't exercise enough. And so I figured it all out. And then I was like, emotionally, what do you need? I need therapy. I need someone to help me navigate my stuff and help me unpack my emotions. Losing my sister was huge for me, man. That was a huge moment for me that I did not give myself any space to unpack. And it just got bigger and bigger, and it began to inform everything, even my teaching. I was unconscious to it, but I realized, oh no, I'm triggered. I'm being triggered by that. I'm shutting down. I'm not doing my best. And then spiritually, I was like, what makes me happy? What makes me laugh? Now I journaled about that. And then I said, tomorrow, you will incorporate things from all three of these lists into your life. And some days are easier than others. I mess up when I don't get all my things done. But the goal is always to love on myself, because I understand, as Bell Hooks did, that's what true love is for real. It's being able to, nurture your own growth and the growth in other people. But Tony says, love is never any better than the lover. And so we got to take care of the self. That's where the love is coming from. It has to come from a healthy, clean, clear, grounded place. I don't want that chaotic love. I don't want that toxic love. So that's what I would say to that.
Brother, listen, I feel like I'm in a session right now with you, man. So like I am listening to you talk, and I'm legit almost tearing up, because it's bringing back stuff like that I've dealt with in life, on the personal side, even on the professional side of things, and students, relationships. I mean, this is so applicable to so much. And okay. I know where I want to go with this, because I love that this conversation has began with self.
Sure.
Do you have ways or thoughts on how we can love others, or help others, support our colleagues, our friends, even if we don't know if they're dealing with stuff, but just maybe, I don't know, check-ins, or just kind of building those kind of love relationships and supporting others as well?
Sure. I have a general answer and a specific answer.
Okay.
General answer is be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I have found that if I'm seeking to nurture those kind of relationships you're talking about that are loving and caring, I have to be vulnerable first. I cannot wait for the other person to one day show up and be vulnerable and invite me into their experience. And now I can be empathetic. I have to start with, here's my humanity. Here's my stuff. Here are my challenges. Here are my weaknesses and my limitations. Here are my complexities. And most times, not all times, most times when I've done that, other humans in the world respond with vulnerability and with compassion and with love. And we can begin to deepen those relationships. So I think about, in the break room, we have teachers lounge, et cetera. Instead of talking and really ragging on students, just sharing about the challenges, sharing about, what? Today is tough, and opening up. So that's my general answer. Specific answer is, in the book, I share 5 questions that I pull from all this theory, from bell hooks to Tony, to my own mother, to other Black people, to talk about love. And I presented in 5 questions that I ask teachers and I ask educators. These are the 5 questions I want you to respond to as you create lesson plans, curricula, resources, have conversations with colleagues, administrators, families. These are the guiding questions grounded in love. One of them is a question around how your teaching practice interrupts, let's start there, the ideas and the people that threaten the humanity of, and you, humanity of who you want, students, humanity of families, etc. And a lot of people, when they think about equity, I know you know this, we often skip that step. Oh, I love them. I used hip hop in my classroom. Cool. But you know what love is also? Interrupting the things that threaten their growth. That's also love. But if you haven't practiced it for yourself and you don't know how, it's going to be really hard for you to stand up for those students because you don't have a practice of interrupting. And so I just share that. Read the book, y'all. But I have 5 other questions that I then give long examples to how I go from those questions to a practice. Not only teaching, but my whole life is in these 5 questions. I wake up every day and I ask myself, these are the 5 that I understand as grounded in love. And I respond to them in ways that make sense. And so if you're looking for some kind of framework or tell you what to do, I don't believe in any of that. I believe that our contexts are very, very different. My humanity is not yours. But I do think that there's a power in questions. And as teachers, we ask lots of questions to get us to things that are loving and that respond to our respective context and our respective challenges and our respective humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I learned about reciprocal vulnerability from Dr. Brene Brown and looking into her work because, she does a lot of similar work in regards to, self-care and being vulnerable. And that is a piece that's hard for a lot of us to start with our own vulnerability to our students, to our colleagues, to our spouses. It's not always easy to do, but I loved how you pointed out that often in your experience, you have begun a conversation from your level of vulnerability, it often is reciprocated.
Yeah. And to your point about students, the better I got at being vulnerable with students, the better the whole class got. And I don't mean better in behavior. I'm not talking about that. Yeah. The experience became one of vulnerability. I remember my first time trying it, I was super frustrated. I mean, the students had done something. And so I remember getting a stool. I sat it in front of them and I sat down and I allowed myself to be sad. And I said, hey, y'all, I'm disappointed and I'm sad. And I'm going to walk you through it. And something about doing that changed the teaching. It changed the dynamic. It changed the interactions. It changed the lessons. And I was like, oh, that's all I ever had to do is be honest. All I had to do is just tell y'all, I'm bothered. Yeah, I'm frustrated. I'm tired. I'm all these human things. And I just started doing more and more of it. They began doing it. And we could have real engagement, real conversations that were not based in assumptions. They assume that I'm trying to be hard. I assume they're trying to be lazy. None of that was true. We were just all trying to do teaching and learning from our own places of our own humanity. And we had a lot of stuff. And that was really hard to do because I just don't come from a sort of family background where we talk about emotions. And I kind of, I was told, you suck it up, right? You suck it up and you keep going. And that's weakness. And I realized, wait a minute, it's actually harder to be vulnerable than it is not to be. I don't think that's weakness. I think that's incredibly strong. To tell somebody how you feel for real, it's my heart still beats. I still get the nerves. I still have to calm myself down to do it. It's incredibly hard work, to your point about vulnerability, but it's just so fruitful. When we can engage from that place, it's just like, now you see me, I see you. We can actually get stuff done.
Yeah, a lot of us grew up in that household. Maybe you didn't grow up in the most affectionate, lovey-dovey, or whatever your home situation was. A lot of us boys grow up, being told. I remember a friend always used to say, "Don't let the girls see you cry."
That's right. My mother was the queen of that. That she was the queen of, Shamari, don't let her see you cry.
Yeah.
Cry. I remember when, with my sister, she didn't let me see her cry. Mm-hmm. And in my head, I'm like, you just lost your baby girl. Mm-hmm. And she wouldn't let me see it until years later. She called me one day. This is, 6 years after crying. And she said, I still think about her. And I started crying and I said, me too. And for the first time, I had someone to talk to about it, Sheldon. Nobody else understood what I was going through. They were like, oh, you lost a sibling. That's hard. But I wanted someone to understand the gravity. And who better than my mother who lost her daughter? And so when she let me in, I let her in. And now I can say I probably call her every 2 weeks. And I can say, I'm thinking about her. And now I don't have to cry anymore. And she's like, me too. And that's all I ever need to hear. And I can continue.
Woo!
Yeah, it's yeah.
Woo! I'm telling you. Oh, okay. All right. Listen, Shamari, like every time we get a chance to chop it up, man, I tell you, look, I ain't got no questions for you, man. We're just going to have a conversation for 30 minutes and then we'll see where it goes. But every time I learn something from you, and this is just a totally different direction than when we took the first time we met up. So this is all a whole nother direction.
Sure.
But I appreciate it. And I truthfully, I mean, ironically, rather, this is part of that self-care, that self-love is engaging, reaching out to someone that you're close to, someone that you care about, or someone that you appreciate, respect, and just look, I'm feeling this way. I'm having a hard time. Can we just talk? Even if it is for only a half hour, or even if it is for a longer time. So thank you for that.
Thank you for allowing me to engage with your humanity. That's what this was for me. This is human to human. And that's really where that's where the magic happens every single time. It's in relationships and it's in the human to human approach.
Yeah. Well, why don't you take us home? Because I want our audience to leave with something.
I would love to say so many things, but the first thing I'll say is you're enough. I end the book with that phrase, you are enough. Doesn't matter what you do or don't do, how you show up or how you don't show up, how effective and ineffective you think you are enough. And you deserve to be here. And I am sure of that because you are here, which is the only evidence we need. You deserve to be here because you are here. And if you weren't supposed to be here, you wouldn't be. But you are. And that's enough.
Amen. All right. Well, listen, if we got some folks that want to connect with you, what is the best way to reach you online?
Twitter, my name, Shamari K, middle initial K, which I won't tell nobody what that stands for, but Shamari K Reid. And I have friends who for years are like, what's the K? What's the K? I'm like, but keep my name at your mouth. But Shamari K Reid on Twitter is how you can find me.
All right. Well, once again, I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Shamari K Reid, author of Humans Who Teach, a guide for centering love, justice, and liberation in school. Shamari, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.